All right, our next question from Ali. Can you speak on Thor's trials in Utgard and the themes we can glean from them? I'm going to let you go ahead and take this, Spawn.
Okay, so couple of things happen, and first and foremost, when you talk about the trials of Thor, there are of course other trials going on that involve other characters in the story, obviously Thialfi and Loki. Roskva does not seem to have placement in the trials, so it's worth just noting that of course Thialfi goes against thought or of memory or of the wit of thinking. And remember, poetically, our ancestors applied different titles. So like there's 3 or 4 different names for a raven, whether you're talking about the physical animal, the poetic animal, things like that. So when we see Thialfi racing against Huey, we see, you know, this the race between, like, I guess poetic wit is possibly playing out, or in actuality, even just memory itself or collective memory. Perhaps some people have postulated that our memories can, since our memories go to the east, which is the symbolic direction of the Jotuns, there are 4 worlds connected to the middle, and that being Ljósálfheim and Svartálfheim, and then we see Vanaheim and Jotunheim. And in the east, the memory well is there. And so we see the root structure of the network of power that is Yggdrasil. It's seen as a network of power, and that root tap goes into the east, into the primordial. So if we were looking at Utgard Loki as kind of a differentiation into the east, into the more primordial building blocks of the material world, we could see that perhaps the actions and therefore the thoughts and memories that relate from Middle Earth or the Middle Guard is extending out eastward. That it has a place because we see Jotunheim as the primordial building material of the middle world. This correlation of the interaction between the things of the past, things of the eternal, things that were deeply primordial, left over or breached from Ymir when he was slain, and the flood, the primordial ocean, which holds great ancient secrets and even animals now that were longer before than even the dinosaurs, like, you know, sharks and things like that. We see this essence of the primordial being associated to mountains, to the land, and in specific, the direction that our ancestors chose to correlate that to was into the east. And this may have contextual sense amongst the Norwegians, as living on the west coast of Norway and seeing the mountains in the east, but it was a symbolic direction. And so when Thor goes into the east, he goes into the land of the primordial creation, into the land of the things that were around since before man. And he goes in and he correlates himself against things that are older than the Middle Guard itself. And so his tests are unique in that regards. So we see this constraint or understanding that his trials are placed around what he does in Jotunheim connects to Middlegard. And that's a very interesting thing. Again, I'm talking about the East being primordial source. It is connected to the Middlegard, our time, our memories, and also to things that happen in Jotunheim, especially the ones that are actually moved by Thor, happen in the Middlegard. When he drinks from the horn, he lowers the sea. When he lifts up Jormungandr, he's shifting that which encapsulates the Middle Guard. When he fights against time, he's fighting against the constant draw of time. And again, it's worth noting that the Nornir come from the east. They are, again, the building blocks of the primordial material world come from Jotunheim. And so when Thor goes into Jotunheim and he tests himself against those things in Jotunheim that are greater representations, and of course he finds that out in the end, the whole story is deeply connected to showing how the catalytic God can come down from heaven into the middle realm, move into the primordial collection, the things that make the spirit of the world that was the world was fashioned from, and go against forces in that world that are older than the world itself, or somehow contain that world. He then shows his might. He shows his deep connection between the upper and the middle by stepping into the primordial and wrestling, quite literally, time itself, moving the binding agent, the constricting agent, the holding agent of the middle world, by lifting Jormungandr in the form of a cat, and also too when he drinks from the horn. And so each of these trials have context. When we talk about drinking games and things like that, it has context to the people that the poem was being recited to. The correlation between drinking and Thor is very, very clear in the stories, but it also applies. I noticed in some of the comments, somebody had brought up about Ukko. Ukko amongst the Sami, clearly the Sami or the Laplander folk had, there was transference there, or I don't know to what degree. Most people believe that there was an accepting of Thor, or that Thor was already amongst them, just in their own version. But he went by other names too amongst the Sami, other than Ukko. He also went under Horagalis and also Toraturos. And there are direct correlations to some of the rituals. The consumption of alcohol and the amount that is consumed was seen as a correlation to the might of the god. That perhaps the people were a conduit, and that their consumption of the bounty, the extended bounty of ale that had been produced, somehow correlated back into a gift giving of strength. And this is just by accounts. So the fullness of this ritual I'm not super familiar with, but it's worth noting that the context of the drinking game would have palpable entertainment value / spiritual understanding / cultural understanding of the idea of what he's doing. And then the lifting of the cat, again, it's tongue-in-cheek with the ideas, like when you pick up a cat and their stomach kind of stretches, they're making that joke. It's just simply as lifting a cat up, and then suddenly it's not. And then it expands out to the constrictive force of the equilibrium of the planet. Some have it correlated to the equator or to the currents of the ocean. And so thus literally the constraint of flow of the primordial ocean around the middle guard is being shifted. So the water's being dropped, it's being moved, and then time itself is being wrestled against, and it only brings him to one knee. And then of course Utgard-Loki says, if I had known the power you possessed, I would have never let you in here. And of course, again, there's that tongue-in-cheek thing in which basically there's this kind of like long list of trials that are demeaning, or but then they turn out they're not demeaning at all. They're actually extremely huge, and suddenly Thor and Loki and Thjalfi and Roskva suddenly come to a new realization, one of how deep and how residual the primordial realm is, but also how much he could then affect it in that world, and it would affect the middle world. So that, I think, is the power of that story in relation to like metaphysical concepts, and the power of Thor in relation to the very material plane that we live on.
Landon asks, is it a must to wear Thor's hammer in Asatru? Yes. So let me qualify the yes. You do what you want, but if your intention is to wear something that symbolically represents Asatru, then yes, um, it is what it is. Everybody that, and I meant this earlier, the more we spread out on everything, the less, words escape me tonight a little bit. I apologize. The less goes behind the force of that point. If we're all behind the tip of that spear, then it has power behind it and has a meaning. Branding matters. The cross equals Christianity. If you are any person in the entire world and you see a cross, that equals Jesus. And you get that, and everybody understands it. Star of David equals Judaism. Thor's hammer equals Asatru, and it needs to, because if it doesn't, then we lose all that containment. If you go somewhere wearing a Thor's hammer, and this has happened, I mean, this is an amazing thing that's happened in the time that I've been involved in Asatru. There was a time that, nobody would recognize a hammer. Is that a broken cross? Is that an anchor? No, anymore. I get comments very regularly at the gas station, at the store, at wherever, hey, nice hammer. They understand that it's a hammer. They understand it's Thor's hammer, and they understand it means that I'm Asatru. If you have a boar, most people don't know that that means that you worship Freyr. If you have, a falcon or something, most of that people don't realize that's a reference to Freya. Or, any of the other symbols of our gods. Wear them as well, wear them in addition. But if the point is, and the point for our ancestors certainly was, to identify themselves as true to the Aesir, then yes, the hammer of Thor is what identified that to everyone outside and inside. Hey, he's one of us, or hey, he's on the other team. So, in that sense, I do think it's essential if that's what you're trying to do with your jewelry. If you just want to wear a pendant for you personally, because you feel devoted to a certain God and it's between you and that God, then by all means, wear whatever you think is appropriate that way, please. But the one doesn't restrict the other. You feel you could go out there and be the Asatru Mr. T if you want, and you can have all the bling you need. I'm not even joking with it. I mean it 100% serious. You go hard. But the hammer itself is going to mean something to the people you encounter, whereas the other symbols aren't.